So, as you probably guessed by the title of the video, this is not a Disney video. Oh my god, she's not doing a Disney video. Um, I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit about My Hero Academia. And I do like My Hero Academia. I have a poster of it up in here. It's over here on the wall. I'll put like a picture of what the poster looks like over here. But I also kind of wanted to talk about, obviously I'm doing Disney videos at the moment, but I kind of had the idea in my head of, I also had a request from someone that wanted me to do an anime video, so I figured I'd kind of thought about waiting, but then I'm like, I kind of want to do one now, because I've talked so much about Disney, I kind of wanted to talk about something else. Um, so this is going to be a video about the Shimura family, which is the family of Nana Shimura, who is, of course, the predecessor, All Might's predecessor, to One for All, and her son and his wife and his parents-in-law and his son and daughter. And of course, we know that his son ends up being Tomura Shigaraki, who is, of course, the current successor to All for One. So I kind of wanted to talk about that family, what we know about the family so far. So if you're not all caught up on the manga, this will have spoilers in it. If you've read all the manga, then this really won't have a whole lot of spoilers in it, because most of what I'm talking about was talked about in the paranormal. I think it was the not the paranormal liberation arc, but the arc before that, where it's all centered on the villains, and we learn about Tomura's backstory. We actually learn a bit more about Himiko's backstory in that too. Himiko Toga's backstory in that as well. I also have another My Hero Academia video that I'm kind of thinking about doing. We'll see how this one goes first. So what I wanted to talk about for this video is the history of the family. So we will start with Nana Shimura, who is awesome. One of the things that I like about this is in the Funimation dub, she is voiced by the same lady that voices Robin in One Piece. And they're two very different characters. Nana very much likes to, smile and, make sure, she made sure to teach Toshinori that he needs to keep smiling to be a hero, to give people hope. And with Robin, it's very hard for her to smile. Back when she was, with everything that happened to Robin, with her family, with her mother, with her island, all the different, all the hell that she's been put through for 20 years before ending up with the Straw Hats. And then finally being with the Straw Hats, she finally gets to start smiling for real. And, she starts building these real bonds of friendship with them. Nana kind of is more the, smile all the time type of thing. And, to give people hope. So there's, they're both voiced by the same actress. And when I heard Nana talk in the anime for the first time and Robin's voice came out, I was just like, okay, that made me happy. But Nana's backstory, we know that she got her power from, I do believe her predecessor's name was Shin, who is this gentleman here, who Nana is the 7th user of One for All. So he would be the 6th user of One for All. We don't know what his quirk is yet. We were only just introduced to him more formally introduced to him during, Izuku's little coma stint. But, when we kind of got to meet the other ones as well, that are part of, One for All, the other vestiges in there. We don't know too much about her backstory. We don't know how she met him. We don't know if, she was a hero beforehand and then he found her. I do have a theory that she did not have One for All when she had her son, when she had Kotaro. Because Nana strikes me as the person that she had Kotaro first, and then she was found by Shin. And he gave her One for All then. Because she had proved that she was the right kind of hero to have it, and she already had her own quirk float. But when it came to Nana, she, what we learned about the vestiges, what we learned about the previous holders of One for All is that if you already have a quirk, you can only hold on to One for All for so long before it starts to hurt your body, like what happened with the fourth user. Um, and Toshinori was able to have it for so long because, All Might was because he didn't have a quirk. And Izuku is the same way. And that kind of implies that, okay, Nana may not have had it for very long before she, was killed by One for All. Or, excuse me, All for One. And I have a slight caveat on the her dying part, but I'll get to that in a minute, or I'll get to that after I talk about the idea for how long she's had the quirk. So with Nana, we know that she has her son. She has her son Kotaro, who he grows up. She gave him up for adoption after her husband was murdered. My thought on this is her husband was murdered by All for One, which is okay. That's not good, and she didn't want to risk her son being killed by him, so she, gave her son up for adoption. And it is very much shown that she loved her son very, very much. And she even wrote him a letter. I don't quite think in his young mind he understood that he was doing it. She was giving him up for his own good, not because she was choosing her hero life over him, but because she didn't want him to die because of her hero life. Which unfortunately to him, he doesn't quite understand that. We don't know exactly what age he was when she gave him up. We know that he was 33 when he died, but we don't know how old he was when she gave him up for adoption. Given how young he looks in the pictures, I would assume between about the ages of 4 to 7 range, probably. And at that age, you kind of understand that, okay, well, my mom gave me up. My dad's dead. My mom gave me up. It looks to you, as a kid that maybe your mom's picking being a hero over being your mom. Even though she very much loved him. She loved him so much that she gave him up that way, and then even told, Gran Torino and Toshinori not to look for him. No matter what, don't look for him. I kind of even wonder how he even found out that his mother died. Because if she gave him up for adoption when he was still a kid, to this other family, so he would be in a good foster family. I'm sure Nana did a good background check on this family to make sure that her son was not going to be going to an abusive home. That seems like a good thing that she would have done. She's not going to just pick some family willy-nilly and say, okay, here, take my son. I got to go fight the thing that's in charge of all the bad things in Japan. I probably won't be coming back. Just keep him safe. The dog's laying over here by the window. He may come into camera or not. We don't know. We'll see. Yeah, let's talk about a pet when I'm talking about the Shimura family, given what happened to Tenko when he was a kid. Okay, maybe not. But when it comes to, my theory is that, she definitely did a background check on this family before she, before she, gave him up for adoption to them, because she wanted to make sure that he was going to have a good family, a good life. Unfortunately, we know that later on that doesn't really work out so well for him, but she wanted to at least give him a good shot at that and not have to have him being chased down by, All for One. But she ends up going off, she trains Toshinori for a while, she gives him One for All, and she has Gran Torino there helping her train Toshinori after she finds him. We don't 100% know if, she found Toshinori before she gave her son up for adoption or after, but given the fact that she probably told Toshinori not to go look for him, it was probably after she found him. And as far as we are aware, Nana is the only holder of One for All to have had any kids. Because we don't think that, All for One's brother had any kids. We don't know about, number 2 or number 3. The guy that went off for, 19 years to live in the forest and train didn't have any kids. Daigoro Banjo, as far as we know, he didn't have any kids. Same thing with Shin. And we know that Toshinori doesn't have any kids. The All Might doesn't, even though, Izuku's like the closest thing to a kid that he has, but they're not genetically related. There's the whole theory that like All Might is Izuku's father, but they don't know it, or that what is it? The other one is that All for One is Izuku's father, and that either Inko knows or doesn't know. And I don't know which one of those theories I subscribe to. I'm just going to be like, we'll just wait and see what Horikoshi does with Izuku's father. It may not be a big thing at all. It may just be there. We don't know. But, Toshinori doesn't have any kids. Nana is the only one that we are aware of that had any kids. And she was the only female the only female holder of One for All also, but she was the only one that had any descendants. And in that knowledge, that kind of implies that she had her son before she got the quirk, or before she even knew about the quirk. And, we don't know how long it was between when she gave him up for adoption and when she died. When, that big final fight between her and, All for One, that, that she sent Toshinori and, told Toshinori and Gran Torino to leave, and then she would fight One for All. All for One, sorry. She would fight All for One. That'll happen a lot. All for One and One for All, and then we're the Three Musketeers, and that's completely different. But we get a lot of Toshinori, Toshinori has very fond memories of Nana, which makes perfect sense. She was his mentor, his predecessor. As far as we're aware, I think Toshinori was an orphan at the time when he met Nana, so she was probably the closest thing to a mother that he had for a while. And, we know that Toshinori is kind of scared of Gran Torino, even though I'm pretty sure he could, flick Gran Torino into a wall, but, he wouldn't want to do that anyway because Gran Torino's his friend. But we get a lot of, we get flashbacks between Nana and Gran Torino and with Toshinori, with all three of, Toshinori and Gran Torino remembering Nana. Gran Torino was, there for her when she gave her son up for adoption. He would console her to, kind of probably help her understand that, yeah, you probably did the right thing because now, All for One isn't going to be able to come after him, isn't going to try to be able to, kill him. He's safer. I mean, he's still living in a world full of villains, and I'm pretty sure that, One for All could probably find him at some point, but... And yeah, on the note of, I'm pretty sure Kotaru did learn that his mother died at some point, either because, she may not have been reported on in the news as much as she had been in the past, because UA was definitely a thing when she was a hero. She may not have gone to UA, but it was definitely a thing because that's where Toshinori went. But then, that's where Toshinori went to be trained to be a hero, but, Nana may not have gone there. It may have been slightly different rules when she became a hero. Because I don't remember if we get an exact how long UA has been around. There might be there in the stuff, I just don't remember if it was there or not. I mostly did the stuff for the Shimura family for this one for the most part, but we get a lot of, that's where my theory is that she had Kotaru before she got the quirk. Before she even knew about the quirk. Before she even knew about One for All. And that's why she was the only one of them to have a child, because she didn't have it. She didn't get One for All until after her son was born and maybe a couple of years old. Then her husband got murdered, and she maybe tried to raise him a little bit on her own, but between her hero work and possibly him, being threatened by One for All, All for One, maybe All for One gave her an ultimatum of, you can give up, as a way of, making Nana choose for all intents and purposes. He may have given her an ultimatum of, okay, I already took your husband from you. If you get rid of your son, as in you send him away to be adopted or whatever, within a certain amount of time, I won't go after him. He will be safe. I won't mess with him. And it's kind of a way of forcing Nana to choose between being a hero and being a mom. And, that just seems like something that All for One would do. It just seems like something that he would try to do to mess with Nana. And, she did that. She gave him up for adoption. She found him a foster family, probably a very good one. And, but the problem is, and she gave him up, and then she maybe found Toshinori within that time frame, before she gave him up for adoption, and then she still had Toshinori, so she had to train him, and that took more time away from her son. So she's like, okay, well, it gives him more of a family, it gives him a place where he's safe, that type of a thing. And, so she gave him up for adoption. And unfortunately, that hate, he had this hatred for his mother that festered and festered and festered until he ended up taking it out on his own kids and hero society to a degree. We know Nana's ending is that, her and Toshinori and Gran Torino went to go and try to fight All For One. All For One was too powerful, and, Nana was going to die anyway, so, she didn't know that she was going to die anyway because of, One For All being in her body for however amount of time, but she's like, well, I gotta, I'll protect Toshinori and Gran Torino, and they can escape, and Gran Torino can train Toshinori more, and then I'll stay here and hold off One For All, or All For One, so they can escape. My son's, I don't have my son anymore, he's off somewhere else safe. Toshinori and Gran Torino can take care of each other. I gotta at least try something to try to finish off One For All. Doesn't work, unfortunately, and we know that she dies. But given what we learn later, I'm pretty sure that her body, or some parts of her body, were probably somewhat intact. Because I think it's one of the hands that Shigaraki has is hers. And I'm like, okay then, because according to my notes, because I wrote down or I marked down which hands belonged to who. The hand that was on his face had belonged to his father, but then that got crumbled at one point, and then One For All gave him a new one that was Nana's. And in one of the pictures that there is from the manga, it shows her with the back of her hand on his head when we see, him with all of his family around him. His father's here, Nana's hand is here. His sisters are, I think, on his wrists. His two grandparents, they're holding on to him somewhere. And then his mother is also holding on to him somewhere. And that's a very disturbing thing that, okay, so Kotaro was 33 when he died. We know that Shigaraki is 20, and that was stated somewhere. I don't know where, but it was on the wiki. He's 20. So he's a couple of years older than Izuku. We do not know exactly how old he was when everything happened to his parents, given the fact that he had his quirk, or that his quirk awakened in that time frame. I would assume that he was about 4 to 5 range. Considering, he had, his hands kept being itchy and everything what else was going on with his hands when he was a kid. That it, resulted in, what happened. We'll go over that. But, and, reference, Nana's name, Nana is just a Japanese word for 7, for 7th. Nana is also kind of a nickname for grandmothers in a lot of different countries. But then we have Kotaro, Shimura, who is of course, Nana's son. He was 33 when he died. We have no idea what his quirk was. We do know that unfortunately he kind of despised his mother, given the fact that he thinks that she gave him up to go and be a hero because that meant more to her than his own safety, than being with him, which is not true by any means. We know this, but he doesn't. He still has this picture that he had of them, and he keeps that because, it's like the last thing that he has from her that he can't bear to get rid of. He was obviously adopted into a good family. They seem to have a fair amount of money. He still has the same last name of her as Nana, so I'm like, okay, the family didn't make him change his last name, which, I mean, I know some adoptions don't do that, but it's like, okay, so what are we going to do with that? that just would make him easier to track down, I would assume, for, All for One. But yeah, we don't know what his quirk was. Nana's was float, but then, Tenko Tomura's was decay. So, genetic quotes or genetic quirks don't always work that way. Because, some cases they do, some cases they don't. It depends on, what the genetics decide to do. There may have been someone else in the line that may have had a decay quirk that may have come from his mother, from Tenko's mother's side of the family, from, Kotaro's wife's side of the family. His wife's name was Neo, and her name means repair. And I would assume that's kind of like a reference to, because she keeps trying to, fix, Kotaro's relationship with their son and daughter. The daughter's name is Hana. Hana means flower in Japanese. She's Tenko's older sister. For this part of the video, I will be referring to him as Tenko instead of, Shigaraki, because, Tomura Shigaraki, instead of that, because at this moment in his life, he is Tenko Shimura. Still have the T and the S and the T and the S, but, we all know that, All for One is a dick. So, yeah. But we see, not Neo tries very hard to try to get her husband to not be the way that he is to the kids. And her parents, her father, Shizuru is Neo's father, so Tenko's grandfather, maternal grandfather. The kanji for his name worked out to, I think it was 1,000, haven, and husband were what his kanji worked out to, according to the Wikipedia. And then Neo's mother, Mako, worked out to, hers was truth and child, was what her name worked out to, according to the kanji that, Horikoshi used for the names. We don't know their last name. It's not really important at this point in time. We know that Neo married Kotaro several years ago. They have they have Hana and Tenko. And unfortunately, he has a festering hatred for heroes, which he didn't become a vigilante or a villain or anything like that. But he doesn't like it when heroes get talked about in their house by his kids, by his wife, by his parents-in-law. And the parents-in-law, they try to be nice to the kids. They try to comfort the kids. But, unless you can get the kids out of the abusive situation, but, we don't know exactly how much control Kotaro had over things. He may have been all the one that held all the money. Everything else was in his name. And, he keeps talking about, in the chapter when we get the flashbacks to Tenko's childhood, we do get, Kotaro and Neo talking, and he's like, maybe we should just, you and your parents and the kids, maybe you should just leave. Or, maybe I can be better. Maybe I can. And Neo kind of seems to be trying to encourage this because, her name means repair. So she kind of wants to repair the relationship that, that her husband has with the children. And he is physically abusive to the children. I think it is shown that he has struck both Hana and Tenko at various points in time. And he's punished them, obviously, by, beyond just, hitting them. He's also probably, punish them by, taking away toys or yelling at them, which sometimes is worse than being struck, depending on what's being yelled at you. And so there was a lot of that. But then, you know, Hana and Tenko seem to have a very good bond between the two of them. And I kind of want Horikoshi to draw like what Hana would have looked like had she been able to grow up. Um, she's cute. She probably would have ended up looking a lot like her grandmother, a lot like Nana did. But we know that we don't know what Hana's quirk was. Her name was her name means flower, but we don't know if like maybe that meant that her quirk had something to do with flowers, as because Horikoshi kind of likes to do that sometimes. That sometimes the name translates to something that has to do with the quirk. Sometimes it doesn't. But we see a lot of Hana and Tenko kind of talking about heroes. The two of them want to grow up to become heroes. They probably want to go to UA, or maybe Shiketsu or one of the other hero academies that's in Japan. They talk about, I think I remember Hana's talking about something about like the two of them running away, and at some point she does show Tenko the picture of their grandmother to show that our grandma was a hero. And, that probably wasn't the best idea because unfortunately Kotaro finds out that they looked at the picture, and that results in both, Hana blames Tenko, but she was afraid of their father, of course, and she was still a kid. She probably wasn't a whole lot older than Tenko at the time when she died, unfortunately, or when this happened. But, he's still physically abusive to them, unfortunately. And that doesn't end up resulting in a very good thing because Tenko, as a kid, he keeps having these, his hands hurt, they're irritated, they itch a lot. I don't remember if he already has like the neck thing going on, he'll like scratch at his neck a lot. But he keeps having those issues. And then one day, I think it's like the same day after like they had this big blow up with their father, he's out in the yard and they have a dog. Oh god. He's out in the yard and the dog comes over to comfort him and he's petting the dog. He's like hugging the dog, and unfortunately while he's hugging the dog is when Decay fully activates. Dog is when Decay fully activates. And, the dog just kind of disintegrates in his hands. And, Tenko's crying and he's basically had an emotional break. And, that's not a good thing for any kid to have. And it's definitely not a good thing to have for one that, depending on what you touch, crumbles. And unfortunately it results in this big kind of shockwave-ish type thing because Hana came out to try to apologize, and I think she kind of sees what happens with the dog, and then she goes over, and unfortunately, I don't remember if it's like Tenko then touches her, and then she starts to disintegrate, or if it's just kind of like the shockwave type thing that happened, because like the ground starts disintegrating too, because he's like touching the ground, and it starts to spread. The decay spreads through the ground. And it gets his sister, and then his mother comes out and it gets her, and then it starts to like engulf the house to a degree. But so there's the shockwave of decay going, which is not good going out from Tenko. He's kind of the epicenter and it's going toward the house. And quirks are affected by your emotions. We know this very much. That's basically stated. It's just like, it's like if you're an X-Men, if you're a mutant, then, your power is affected by your emotions. If you're, Scarlet Witch, your powers are very much affected by your emotions. Same thing with a bunch of other, DC, Marvel, miscellaneous other quirks in My Hero. Your quirks are affected by your emotions. And your emotions can also direct your quirks. And, Tenko, all that pain and everything that he had, all the abusive from his father, it kind of felt to him at that point in time that his sister had kind of betrayed him a little bit since she blamed him for them finding the picture. but she was scared, and I think Tenko kind of understood that, but it was just kind of this backlash of the quirk activating at the same time that he had the emotional break. And his power surged out and, affected the ground, affected the walls around the house, affected the house, got the dog, got his sister, got his mother, got his grandparents, and then it got his father. And his father is the last one. And his father is more the one that the quirk was directed at, and it's kind of like that everybody else was in the way of the quirk. Tenko probably still to a degree blamed his grandparents, his maternal grandparents, for, not trying to get him and his sister out of there, and probably blamed his mother for the fact that she didn't try to get them out of there. And, he probably still loved the four of them, the three of them and Hana, but his father was where it was emotionally directed at, and unfortunately all the others were caught up in the shockwave of the quirk activating and them in the house. And, so they're gone. They're gone. And then Tenko is left on his own. And when he comes out of the rage emotional break thing that he was in, everything around him is crumbled. And I think that he does suppress what happened, which I don't blame him. I mean, we get kind of a similar thing that happened because with Eri, with her quirk, it affected her father because her father had touched her when her quirk had activated, and he got regressed into nothing. Because, Eri was, couldn't control her quirk at the time, so she couldn't, she didn't know what happened. And, I'm sure that when, Bakugo was activated when he was at school, when he was a kid, with, the explosions coming out of his hands, and, some of the other characters, their quirks probably, some of them probably activated at, not the best time frame. Some of them did. We know with Aoyama that, his naval laser, when he was a kid, his parents had to get him, the belt and everything to help keep it inside. And we know that that does cause him physical problems, and that when you're a kid, when, the naval laser activated when he was a kid, we don't know what his parents' quirks were. They may have, one of them may have had a similar quirk to that, but we don't know how that affected him. If, that was a genetically inherited quirk that he had or not, we don't know. But, other characters, the quirks may have activated at inopportune times, and, I don't necessarily think that it's saying that it's like, oh, if they're a kid and the quirk activates, that they're not necessarily responsible for what happened, because there are, underlying circumstances in certain things, but I don't think that they would be able to find, Eri liable in, a court of law for what happened to her father, because her quirk activated, and she was a kid, and she didn't even know what was happening. Her parents didn't even know what was happening, and then her mother gave her up to be raised by a mafia boss, which is just not a good idea. But, we see Mirio, Lemillion, his quirk is, that, he can phase through walls and such like that, walls and ground and people and, that type of stuff. And, his father points out that, if your quirk activates at a wrong time, you phase through the ground. If you're on a high floor of a building and you phase through the ground, you fall. And, as Mirio points out, it's like when he's, phasing through stuff, he can't breathe. He can't see anything. He can't do anything like that. He has to focus on what he's doing to get himself to where he needs to be able to use his quirk to the fullest extent. So, we learn a lot about that. But, so quirks that activate when you're a kid, depending on what the quirk is, can be very dangerous to you or other people around you. And, Tenko's quirk, unfortunately, was a very, very destructive quirk. Decay, in and of itself, is already a very destructive type of a quirk. And how that activated. Now, there is a theory that his quirk became Decay because it activated when he wanted to destroy everything, and that resulted in it becoming Decay. That could be true, that could not be true. I don't know, since we don't know what other kind of quirks like Kotaro had, or Neo, or the other grandparents had, or what kind of quirk Hana had. We don't know. Or what even kind of quirk like Nana's husband had. We don't know. He may not have had a quirk. Back at that point in time, there was probably a slightly higher population density that were quirkless than, now in One Piece, where it's like 80% of the population has quirks and 20% doesn't. So, yeah, Izuku didn't have a quirk. All Might didn't have a quirk. If Izuku ever needs to pass on One for All, he's going to have to find someone that doesn't have a quirk, which is going to be a hard thing to do at that point in time. And otherwise, it's going to kill whoever he gives it to. Probably very quickly, because, probably a good thing that Mirio didn't end up being the one to get the quirk. That it was Izuku that got the quirk. That was probably the better option out of those two. Not that Miro, if the whole thing of, if you already have a quirk, this is not going to do very well for you. You may be able to hold on to it for a couple of years, but then it's probably going to kill you. I don't think Mirio would have accepted it if he knew those restrictions for it, and I don't think that if All Might knew about the restrictions for, One for All, for that, for like the time frame of the fact that, give it to someone that, if you give it to someone that has a quirk, it's going to make them die faster. If you give it to someone that doesn't have a quirk, it's going to work better for them, like it did with you. And I don't think that All Might then would have considered Mirio, that he probably would have specifically looked for someone that didn't have a quirk, and that was Izuku. Probably would have still ended up with Izuku anyway, because plot. And Izuku's the main character, so that's kind of fun. He's kind of gone off on his own now, but we'll see what happens with that. But but back to the Shimura family. With what we learn about, Tenko, through the flashbacks that we get, during, when the League of Villains is fighting the Liberation Army, the Liberationists, whatever they're called, with, Reed Destro and everything. We do see a lot of, we do learn that part of now he's Tomura at that point in time, of Tomura's past. And, that's not fun. But we learned that at some point when he was a kid, at some point 2 other men, I think, tried to attack Tenko when he was a kid, and they got decayed by the quirk, like their hands were left, because there's like 2 of the hands were from 2 random men who made Tomura angry at some point. And so it's on his shoulders and his sides. But we learn, we know that he was found by All for One. Now, the question implies of, had, All for One may have given Nana the ultimatum of, you can give up your son and I may not go after, I promise I won't go after him, type of a thing. And, he didn't necessarily go after him, but he didn't make that apply to any kids that Kotaro would have. And it may have also just been, the opportunity that presented itself may have been a bit too good of an opportunity for him to not take. For him to not, grasp when it came to the fact of the son of the previous holder of One for All, son has a quirk that I can use. And in a very emotional state right now. Very easily molded into what I want him to be. The opportunity is, you just see, All for One sitting there, probably, debating that concept as he, sees where Tenko is. And he's like, might as well. And he finds the kid and he takes the kid in. Which admittedly, I'm like, is there any good that came out of that? Not really, because Tenko becomes Tomura. Becomes Tomura Shigaraki. And, the Shigaraki translates out to she, death. Gara is grip or handle. And then Ki is tree. So, death, grip, tree. Which, works very well for what his quirk now is. But then we also, I think we learned from in the flashback that Shigaraki was All For One's last name. It was either his last name or it was his brother's name. I think it was his last name. And so that's he gave him that. And then Tomura is funerals in Japan. It also in English, Tomura sounds a lot like to mourn the dead. But then his birth name, Shimura, contains she is intention, in this case for the version of she is intention, Mara is village, and then 10 is resolve, and then arc is arc, I'm assuming is kind of like arc, like a arc of a story, maybe, I'm not sure, and then is what ko means. I'm trying to make sure that I put all the kanji up here and such as I go through. Don't know any Japanese, so your name translates to something in Japanese, but that doesn't mean that I remember how to pronounce everything correctly. But, so we learn about that with Tenko, is, he's like, okay, now you're Tomura Shigaraki. You're no longer Tenko Shimura. That person doesn't exist anymore. And Tomura does seem, and he becomes Tomura. And he's raised by All For One. He's raised kind of the spoiled brat, where it's, he's got Kurogiri there that, serves him. And, All For One kind of guides him and everything. And, and then he, at some point, he does want to form the League of Villains. And then he starts gathering up, all the different members of the League of Villains to work for him. But then we also see that he does have disdain for All Might. And I don't know if it's ever stated that Tomura knows who his grandmother is. Knows that the woman who gave All Might his power was his grandmother. That there's that connection there. So, don't 100% know about that. And as I said, for his for all the different hands that are on Tenko, it's the remains of the first people that he ever killed that were preserved by the crazy doctor. So we have the hands around his neck, came from his mother. The hands on his upper arms, so here, come from his maternal grandfather, so that would be Shizuzo, I think. And then on his elbows come from his maternal grandmother, so that's Mako. And then the hands on his wrists come from his sister, so that's Hana. The hands on his shoulders, specifically, and sides, come from two random men who made Tomura angry. Don't know if that necessarily implies that they were two random men that made him angry when he was still a little kid, like before One For All found him, or before All For One found him, or if it was after he became kind of like One For All's apprentice, and they just, made him angry, and then he killed him, and then he's like, okay, now I have 4 new hands to put on my costume. And then, we have the hand that was on his face, the hand on his face for so long, was from his father. And then at one point, I think it's when they're fighting the Liberation Army, his hand gets destroyed. The hand from his father gets destroyed during, I think, when he has the emotional break. And then he gets a new hand. So it's given to him by the quote that's on Wikipedia is, the hand he wears on the back of his head is a replacement given to him by All For One after he used his quirk to destroy his father's other hand, later to be revealed as Nana's. So, as I said, we didn't know what happened to Nana's body. As I'm pretty sure that he probably considered making her a Nomu. That would have been a big slap in the face to Toshinori and Gran Torino. but he obviously kept part of her. We don't know what kind of she may not have been 100% dead after the end of the battle, and she may have just been so exhausted that he was able to capture her, and then maybe he tortured her for a while, and then eventually she died, or she did die in the battle, and he's just like, well, let's hold on to her body. There might be something I can do with it later. Which, time for the kid to grow up, time for him to have kids of his own, time for him to find Tomura. We don't know when he started wearing the hands to use as his, costume. And it's just like, okay, that implies that he had to hold on to her because Tomura is 20. Tomura's 20 at this point in time. And, however many years ago that he found him, that's that, plus however long it took, Katara to grow up and then have Tomura, have Tenko. That's a long time for him to hold on to Nana's body. And that's disturbing in and of itself. But, All for One isn't exactly the cuddly kind of person in My Hero Academia. No, he's not. But yeah, that's where that goes. That's just disturbing on so many levels. Very disturbing on lots of levels. And we know that we know what happens to Tenko, that Tomura forms the League of Villains, attacks UA at the joint operations, unforeseen circumstances, catastrophe center, whatever it's called, sorry, attacks there, and then, almost, him and Kurogiri and the Nomu bring in all the villains, and they try to kill the kids, and then try to defeat All Might, but that doesn't happen. And then, they try to kidnap Bakugo, which they succeed in kidnapping Bakugo. And then, we get the whole big fight where we watch, Tomura watches as, All for One fights All Might, and then, he gets, Shigura, Tomura and the rest of the League of Villains escape, and then we have, they go through the whole, they find Gigantomatkina, they find the doctor, they, go on this, excursion thing into the woods where they're gone for a while, and then they find the Liberation Army. And then they fight them, and then they get control of that, and then we just had the big arc that we just finished, where, he now has All for One, but All for One is now controlling his body, and, oh god, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen to Tomura. And then, Izuku got to talk to the, Nana's vestige inside of, One for All, and she asked him if he could kill Tenko, if he could kill her grandson, and Izuku said no, which, is revealed to be kind of a test on Nana's part. The test that they wanted to, test to see if Izuku would use his power for that, or if he would try to save Tenko, try to save that little kid that's inside of Tomura, that's just, the kid that's inside of him that's like screaming and is in pain, that's crying, and Izuku just wants to help him. And we don't know what's going to happen with that. There's, theories out there that Tenko could have become a hero, which is, if Tenko had become a hero, that would have been fine. I've read fanfics where he becomes a very good hero, and he uses his quirk to, it's like a rescue type of a hero. He can, gets to the point where he can, control the, the radius of how much of a thing he decays, and he can get to what's underneath it without, shifting all the other rubble around him. He could have been a very good hero. Probably wouldn't have had hands all over him, but not that. He probably wouldn't have had hands all over him, but, he, it would have been better, I read fanfics where he's, found as a kid instead and raised by All Might. Before everything happened with his parents. It was, they died some other way, but then, All Might found Tenko and then he raised him. Or, Tenko's Tenko and Hana escaped from their father, and they were taken somewhere better because, he was, I guess, taken away for child abuse or whatever the case may be. And, everything else had happened with that. But, Tenko could have been a hero. Tomura's way far down the rabbit hole, and we got to see if Izuku's going to actually be able to save him. And, maybe see what else happens to the rest of the, Liberation Army, and the rest of the League of Villains is on the run for the moment, so we'll see what happens with that. And, Tomura is kind of in a All For One's in control of his body, so we don't know if he's Tomura's sleeping right now until All For One has finished with whatever other changes he needs Tomura to go through. But that's what we got with that video. It ended up being a little bit longer than I thought, but I'm probably going to try to use more of a cheery quote at the end of this video, considering how dark it got, because I think Nana has some good quotes that she uses, things that she says throughout the story, from the flashbacks that we get. So there'll probably be a Nana quote at the end of this, or 2 or 3, depending on how long her quotes are, particularly the where she's smiling, for making sure that Toshinori knows that you have to smile to be a hero. That helps people, and that's just good. So that's what we have here. It's my first My Hero Academia video. Tell me how I did. Tell me if you want more of these. I have another one planned. We'll see if that one gets done, but I have another one planned. And I've still got the other Disney ones. But I thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye. When you have to save someone, they're usually in a scary situation. A true hero saves not only their lives, but also their hearts. That's what I believe. So no matter how scary things get, give them a smile as if to say, I'm A-OK. The people in this world who can smile are always the strongest.